So as promised, we are going to talk about the Green New Deal. Yes, I hurt my thumb. I went skiing and that's all it took. So anyways, okay. So the Green New Deal, you've probably heard of it. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been because it has been plastered everywhere. You've obviously been living under a rock. So let's talk about this. So this was a proposal that was made back in February. And everyone has a misconception, not everyone, but a lot of people have a misconception that this is just about green energy. It actually isn't. So the green part, yes, that's about, renewable resources, but the New Deal is actually, so the New Deal part of the Green New Deal, it's actually a throwback to the original New Deal back in the 1930s under President Roosevelt. So it was a fiscal policy, meaning it was a stimulus package, from Congress, where they're trying to get rid of, they're trying to give tax cuts and stimulus packages and have, infrastructure projects and, different government projects trying to get people employed and get the economy up and running to stimulate the economy. So that was back in the 1930s during the Great Depression. So that's what the Green New Deal is really about. It's not just about green energy. It is about really affecting the U.S. economy. So we're going to talk about this in two components because there's a lot of moving parts to this, like a lot. So and I'm not going to focus on all of them because there's just too much, but we are going to focus on three of the major ones, which is debt forgiveness, the Medicare for All, and the renewable resources. So we're going to talk about the first two in this first video, and then the third one in the next video. I know it almost looked like I flipped somebody off. But anyway, so let's talk about this. So the Green New Deal. Okay, the first two that we're going to talk about is the student debt forgiveness and the Medicare for All. Now, this is very interesting to bring about these two topics. The latter of the two has been something that's been discussed for a long time. Ever since even the idea of Medicare came into formation. But the debt forgiveness is a more recent topic that's been brought up, and it's definitely a hot topic. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's estimated that student loans right now are running anywhere from $1 to $1.5 trillion in the U.S. economy. That's a lot. And this is not the fault of any one party. This is the fault of multiple parties. Okay, so let's talk about this. So the reason that they're wanting to do a debt forgiveness is because the upcoming generation is swimming in student loan debt. Again, it's not the fault of one person, it's the fault of many people. It's the fault of universities, it's the fault of the federal government, it's the fault of the students, and let me explain why. So the federal government decided to take over student loans back in the 2000s. They decided to get rid of the private sector, and everything was going through them for student loans. And so they started doling out all this money. Well, the universities realized that this was basically indirect funding from the government. So it's indirect because it's not directly from the federal government giving money to the universities. It's indirect because the universities are receiving all this money from the federal government via the student. Okay, so the student is the vehicle that takes the money from point A, which is the federal government, to point B, which is the university. Okay, so once the universities realized, hey, they're going to go ahead and pretty much approve anybody and everybody for student loans, they started jacking up their tuition prices to astronomical levels. It was awful. So and they knew they were going to get paid, and that's exactly what happened. They got paid. And the federal government did not in any way try to put any checks and balances. They really were just kind of doling out the money to anybody that wanted a loan. And they weren't verifying how much the students really needed for tuition. They were just doling money out. And so, and then the students took those loans and definitely paid tuition with it, but they didn't only pay tuition with it. They also decided to pay for rent with it. They decided to pay for their cars with it. They decided to pay for, going out to eat, going on vacations. I mean, if you are walking away with an undergrad degree and $250,000 in student debt, you've done it wrong. Okay, you've lived off the loans. There's no way to hide that. You can't hide those numbers. So no undergrad costs $250,000. Okay. So this is the problem. This is why I say it's the fault of all parties, the universities, the federal government, and the students. So they're swimming in debt, and there's a lot of talk that this is, cause for concern, that it's bogging down the U.S. economy for the future because they're not able to buy homes, they're not able to, have savings, they're not able to do all this because all the money is going back to paying off the loans. Okay, again, this is not the fault of one, but the fault of many. So how do we address this? Well, there's not really any viable solutions right now that have been brought up. So, so some of the ideas that have been brought up is, hey, you should make the colleges co-sign for these loans. Another one is we should package these loans and sell them. I'm just like, both of these are horrible ideas. So the packaging and selling these as an investment, awful, awful idea. It's that is pretty much the same thing as what we did before the financial crisis with subprime mortgages. So why would you think that this would be a good idea to do with student loans, especially when they're saying that there's a lot of struggle for students to pay back these loans? Not a good idea to package these and sell them as an investment. The other problem with the other solution, which is, well, the colleges should co-sign for these loans. Okay, horrible idea, because now what will happen is that they will only sign, because they don't have to co-sign for every loan. I mean, if they decide to deny a loan, they could deny a loan. So what would happen would be that they would deny the low-income families and only approve loans for the high-income families. So then you will have this adverse effect that you were not anticipating, which is the universities will even exclude more the low-income families and only admit the high-income families because they're the only ones that they would be willing to co-sign for. So that's a horrible idea. That defeats the whole purpose of having, education access for all. And so there's not right now. The problem is that this idea of how to fund this and how to implement it, it's seriously underbaked, right? It's not been in the oven long enough. This is a great idea. It's a great idea to throw out, but there's not any direction or funding mechanism to make this actually viable. And that's the problem also with the Medicare for All. Again, great idea. Definitely you want to take care of people within your sovereignty. But the problem is that there's no funding. There's zero funding for this. And there's not really a format that would continue to keep the U.S. at a high level of care that it provides now. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, it doesn't provide a high level care. You know what? You can try to argue that all you want, but if you look at the statistics, we do. We actually have really high care here. That's why a lot of people come into the U.S. for medical care. And so whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter. The funding is not there. The mechanism for this to be efficient is also not there. And so that's the problem with this proposal, is that it's just threw out a whole bunch of ideas, but not any real direction of how to implement this and how to fund this. Because without the funding, it's meaningless. It's just an idea. And definitely it's getting people to talk, but it still is not giving any direction of where this needs to go. And this is why I did the video on the modern monetary theory, because the politicians that are pushing for this proposal are saying, hey, look, we can use MMT to go ahead and fund this. Well, the Federal Reserve, and if you're not sure what MMT is, or modern monetary theory, go ahead and watch my video. I've made one about this and you'll better understand it. So, so the problem with this proposal is that there's no real, again, funding mechanism for this. And as much as we would love to say that, oh, well, we can just do this, without a funding mechanism, this is not going to come to fruition. And so, again, this is where the idea was seriously underbaked, because it's just like, oh, we're just going to put this in the proposal. It sounds like a good idea. Okay, that's great. There's lots of good ideas, but there's a reason why not all ideas end up coming into reality, because there's no functionality to it. There's no way to fund it, and so that's where there's big problems with this. There's big holes in this proposal. There's not really a lot of detail about how this would work and how to pay for it. And so, so without that, again, it's just an idea, and it's, I mean, again, it's seriously underbaked, because this proposal was slapped together rather quickly. The creator of this proposal has not been in office very long. They haven't really had any experience with politics to speak of, and so they just kind of slapped this proposal together and threw it out into the media. And there's just a lot of holes to it, and so this needs to be more thought out, because the other problem with something like this is that you're trying to stimulate the economy, which is what the whole proposal is really about. It's about the U.S. economy. It's not about just green energy. In fact, it's really a smaller portion of the whole big picture. The whole big picture is to overhaul the whole U.S. economy within a 10-year timeframe, which not feasible. Okay, not feasible for the size of the U.S. economy, with the billions and billions of moving parts to it. There's no way you can transform the whole U.S. economy in 10 years. That is unheard of. So trying to overhaul the whole U.S. economy in 10 years, especially in the format of our economy, it's not going to work. And so that is just, again, not feasible, which is another hole to this proposal. The other problem with that is that you're trying to stimulate the economy when it's already in a period of growth. If you do that, it's going to end up causing bigger problems in the future than anything else. So if you try to overstimulate the economy, it ends up causing basically a crash, which is what we experienced during 08 and what happened also before the Great Depression. So you don't want to overstimulate the economy. It needs to be growing at a nice steady pace, which is what the whole point of the Federal Reserve is to do, is to keep the U.S. economy stable. And so trying to stimulate it with all these different programs, it's not ideal. And so there's definitely, like I said, there's just a lot of holes in this proposal. It just hasn't been thought out. And so it can have, there's definitely some points that it's been bringing up, and a lot of people are talking about it, and that's great, but as far as actually having a feasible plan, it doesn't propose anything of that nature. It's just a lot of just ideas that they're just kind of throwing out into the media. So So that's this video about, just part of the Green New Deal. We'll talk about the green part in the second half of this series. But a quick market update, the markets are doing what they should. Like I said, the last quarter was just all overhype. The media was just kind of trying to report anything they could get their hands on and cause a lot of undue panic for no reason. The markets are coming up nicely. There's a lot of talk of global slowdown. FedEx, is talking about that there's global slowdown. Personally, for me, their analysis of this in the past, I would say, was more correct when they would say something like this. But since they've lost a lot of business to Amazon and they have become very, a lot of the revenue stream had come from Amazon in the past, and now they've lost business to Amazon. I don't necessarily agree with their outlook that the global slowdown is to the level that they say it is. I think it's probably taking just another, it's taking a breather with the stock market. But it's, again, all the indicators look good. The Federal Reserve came out today and they said that they are not looking to have any interest rate movements this year. That actually there was mixed reactions to that data or to that information because I don't think that we're not going to see any rate movement this year. I would not be surprised to see 2 rate movements this year. Powell is going to very much keep his finger on the pulse to see how the economy is doing and decide if it should be moved or not, if the rates should be moved, and also how fast they should be unwinding the balance sheet. So, and I wouldn't expect it early on, but I would expect it later on. So again, if we see 1 or 2 interest rate movements, I'm not going to be surprised at all. If we don't see any, I would actually be more surprised by that. But we'll see how the year unfolds. So as always, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And of course, always hit the subscribe button, and I will talk with you guys later.